Tafsir, are we recording yet? Tafsir, can you hear me? Or Lizette?
Yes, yeah,
Or
all good.
Zaid? Okay, all good with the YouTube and stuff? Okay. Members, it is 9 o'clock and today is the Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism Committee. And today we are dealing with the process regarding the application process of the interviews or the appointments for the Gambling and Racing Board. We will also be discussing the process regarding the submissions we have received for the 19th Gambling Amendment Bill. Members, I've not received any apologies. And secondly, I would like to ask that before we start, in terms of the agenda, first on the agenda is the process leading up to the shortlisting of the candidates to fill the vacancies of the board and the results of the probity. And then second on the agenda, obviously, is the legislation, the amendment bill, and how we're going forward in terms of public participation. I would like to ask that the results of the probity report that is part of the process leading to shortlisting of the candidates, if we please deal with that at the end of the meeting. The reason I suggest this, and I would like members to indicate whether they agree or disagree, please, is I would like to request that the results of the probity we do as a closed meeting. And for IT reasons, I feel it's going to be difficult if we close a meeting in between and then open it later again and close. And it's going to be very difficult with YouTube, asking people not to be in a meeting, asking them back into a meeting. And the reason I want to ask that we close the results of the probity report is, for example, if me, Deirdre, if I apply as an applicant, all of my personal information comes before this committee. And we don't know what this personal information might entail, such as my ID and police clearance and things like that, for example. And for such reasons, due to the personal information in the results of the probity, I want to thus request two things. One, that we change the agenda to allow the results of the probity at the end of the meeting, and that we close that section of the meeting. I'm going to open it up to members to discuss, but this is, firstly, can we move it on the agenda? And two, can we close it? And I would like indications from members so that we can make a decision in this regard. Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I support the proposal.
Okay. Other members, are you okay with that? That we move the section and that we close that section due to personal information?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay, I see Honourable van der Westhuizen wrote in the section on the chat. He wrote that we deal with the probity report in a closed part of the meeting and that we change the order of the agenda around so the probity report is dealt with after the legislative process. Anyone else? Is everyone else happy with this? Okay. Members, if that is okay then, because I see no other hands, I'm going to then first ask that I'm going to quickly just put out that we are being recorded. It is on YouTube. I've confirmed at the beginning of the meeting with Mr. Abbas that it is being recorded and on YouTube Live. We're going to receive the presentation first regarding the application process. I will ask Mr. Phillips to introduce himself and the officials present today. I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves. If you would like to speak, when you have your hand raised, you're allowed to obviously put your mic and your video on. I just ask that you put your mic and your video back off after you have spoken. If you want to speak, raise your hand. If you have completed speaking, I also ask that you take your raised hand off. And I also ask that we keep the chat function clear for technical matters. Members, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourselves now.
Goeiemôre, voorsitter. Good morning, everyone. Dalen Mitchell.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell.
Môre, voorsitter. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, lid van die komitee.
Môre, member van der Westhuizen. Ek weet nie wat die Afrikaanse woord vir member is nie. Next person.
Lid.
Lid, jammer. Okay, next person.
Good morning to the committee and the chairperson. Member Makamba Boja. Thank you.
Morning, Member Makamba Bocha. Member Nkondlo, are you with us? I see your name on the participant list. Maybe you must just unmute yourself. Member Nkondlo, are you with us? Okay, perhaps she's having some technical difficulties. Mr. Phillips, I'm going to hand over to you for introductions.
Good morning, Chairperson, members. Basically, I'm Anthony Phillips. I work in the Provincial Treasury, responsible for economic and fiscal services. I have my two colleagues with me, Ms. Claire Horton, which will do the presentation, and Dr. Ndodana Ndleya, that will actually also assist with this. This morning's meeting is more for us actually just to take the committee through the requirements of the Act, the regulations in terms of filling vacancies to the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. We also want to just maybe enlighten in terms of the process that we followed thus far, the applicants we received, and maybe set up actually for the committee to be able to have an interview process on the 21st of August actually, and then obviously as the chairperson raised the issue earlier on around the closed session around the probity in terms of what comes out. Maybe chairperson, without delay, actually can I hand over to my colleague Ms. Claire Horton actually that will take us through the presentation on the legislation and the process and the candidates that we received thus far.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Regarding possible interviews, I'm going to leave that discussion to the members once we're done with this presentation, as we will need to decide whether or not we will have interviews in terms of the legislation. But you are welcome to continue with the presentation. We will have questions and answers after this. Thank you.
Thank
you. Good morning. Just wanting to make sure you can see the presentation. It's on the screen. Could you confirm that you can see it?
I am able to see it. Members, are you able to see the presentation? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. I'm going to assume members can see since I'm also able to see.
Thank you very much. Okay. I hope, unfortunately, in terms of my setup, I hope you can see the second slide because there's a bit of a delay on my side. But I will take you through the process in terms of what's indicated in terms of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Act and regulations. Members must indicate in terms of how much detail, because on a previous occasion we have provided all the members the process as dictated or governed by the Act. As the committee will know, the board consists of 7 members who are appointed on a part-time basis by the Executive Council, and the process necessitates the public participation process in the nomination of candidates for appointments, provided that the standing committee responsible for this act evaluate all the candidates as to their suitability for appointment. The members of the board shall be eligible persons who have appropriate knowledge or experience, provided that appointments to the board are made with consideration of gender sensitivity. In terms of
apologies for interrupting. I just wanted to check, are you still on slide 1? Because I'm only seeing the start of the presentation.
Okay, can you now see it? Sorry. Can you see the second slide now?
Unfortunately, I'm still able to see slide 1. Members, are you able to see slide 2?
Sorry, Chair.
Okay, so other members are also stuck on slide 1.
Okay.
Similarly.
Let me try loading it again.
Or Claire, I can share it if
okay.
that's
Thank
easy
you.
for you. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
It's shared. I'm on slide 2 now.
Thank you. Can you put it on the presentation method, just so that it's a little bit bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now you may continue.
Perfect.
Great. Super. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, in terms of section 4 of the Act, in terms of eligibility for appointment as a member or employee of the board, it states that you should be a natural person. In the case of a board, be of the age of 25 years, be a citizen and ordinary resident in the province, be a fit and proper person, be in good financial standing, and not be disqualified. Section 5 on the next slide indicates the disqualification factors for appointment, and they are as follows: whether if you've been convicted of an offence in terms of this Act or similar law, have been convicted of theft, fraud, are an unrehabilitated insolvent, removed from any office of trust or on account of misconduct or dishonesty, any political office bearer, anyone, whether personally or through a spouse, family member or partner or associate, has a direct or indirect financial interest in the gambling business or establishment, or has interest in business or enterprises that may conflict or interfere with the performance of the duties as a board member. In terms of section 3 of the regulations, that provides in terms of the process that needs to be followed for the nomination and appointment of board members. In terms of the regulation 3, it specifies that the accounting officer shall by notice publish in each of the official languages of the province in the Provincial Gazette and any such other printed media as deemed appropriate, invite nominations for appointment as a member of the board. A nomination containing the names, address, telephone numbers, and curriculum vitae of nominees shall be submitted in writing to the designated accounting officer within 14 days of the publication of the notice. The accounting officer should place at the disposal of each of the nominees an application form and provide them with 21 days with which to complete the form. Application forms need to be accompanied by a signed declaration stating their willingness of the applicant to disclose full information in terms of personal and financial affairs, a statement signed by the applicant that they comply with the provisions of section 4 of the Act in order to be eligible for appointment, Failure to submit completed application renders the application invalid. After the expiry of the period, the accounting officer is responsible to place in similar media a call for comment on the applications received by publishing the names and addresses of each of the nominees and the applicants and calling for comment period of 14 days. Then in terms of section 4 of the regulations specify the procedure for appointment. The designated accounting officer shall evaluate each of the applications received. In the case of filling a vacancy, then not less than 3 names of the most suitable candidates for appointment, provided that the designated accounting officer may request such additional information or documentation regarding an applicant's personal and financial affairs as he or she may deem necessary to evaluate the application. The shortlist referred to, as well as a comprehensive list of all applicants together with all available information and documentation regarding their personal and financial affairs and any public comments received in terms of Regulation 3(6) shall be submitted for consideration to the relevant standing committee. The standing committee shall within 7 days from receiving this documentation submit a final list of not less than 50 names if it's in terms of a new board, or in respect of any vacancy, not less than 3 names, together with a comprehensive list of all applicants to the responsible member for submission for consideration by the Executive Council. The responsible accounting officer shall, upon receipt of a resolution of the Executive Council concerning the successful candidates, inform all applicants of the outcome of the process. The next slide is to provide the committee with a profile in terms of the current board member profile, in terms of who they are, their appointment end date, as well as their profession and experience. So first person on the list, Mr. Lekay. His term of office is due to expire in December this year. He has a financial background and is current chairperson of the board. Ms. Nyati, she has a background in law and her appointment date ends in 2022. Mr. Nichols' appointment date also ends in 2022 and has a background in finance and governance. Mr. Aronser, whose term ends in 23, has a background also in finance and governance. Mr. Basudé, whose term of appointment also ends in 2023, has a legal background. And Ms. Fani, whose term of office expires in May next year, has a governance background. So currently there are 6 members on the board. There's a current vacancy at present. Could you go to, this briefly summarizes what I've just mentioned in terms of the profile of the existing or current board members in terms of their qualifications and experience. As indicated, 3 members have finance or accounting qualifications, 2 members have legal qualifications and experience, and 1 member has a background in public administration and governance. I've mentioned earlier in terms of when vacancies are due. This current process aims to fill 3 vacancies, 1 of which is currently vacant, and the 2 upcoming vacancies in December this year and May next year. Thank you. Okay, this briefly captures in terms of the speaking to the legislation in terms of the process that we followed. We advertised in terms of the requirements of the regulations in Vukani, the Provincial Gazette, the Mail and Guardian, Die Burger, the Weekend Argus in November. There were a total of 20 nominations received. In accordance with Regulation 3, we provided each of the nominees with the application form, of which 9 forms were returned. We then also advertised the names and addresses of each of the applicants in terms of in the same media as which we had called for nominations, and we received no comment. We had also requested an external service provider to provide a probity assessment of all 9 applications, and that's what's going to be discussed a bit later. I think also the committee here needs to obviously note the COVID did cause delays in the processes. Okay, next slide. In terms of as one of the applicants in their application form indicated an address which is outside of the Western Cape. And on a previous occasion, Provincial Treasury had received a legal opinion in terms of if an applicant indicates an address outside of the Western Cape. We subsequently sent that applicant a series of questions to determine their ordinary resident status. And the questions that have on a previous occasion been used as guidance from legal services for us to consider are listed below in terms of the nature and cause of the applicant's physical presence within an area, whether business or employment, the average length of stay within an area outside of the Western Cape, whether the applicant's family reside and or children attend school in the Western Cape, whether the applicant intends to return to the Western Cape after a short absence, and whether the applicant considers their dwelling or residence home and belongings to be. We have made available the applicant's responses to those questions. Okay, in terms of the shortlisting of applies, the Act has no specific shortlisting criteria other than that the person should have, a suitable skill profile, and applications should be considered in terms of also being gender sensitive. And they should have appropriate knowledge and experience. But I think the King report provides us some further clarity in terms of what the committee may wish also to consider in terms of boards ought to be diverse, particularly with regards to academic qualifications, technical expertise, relevant industry knowledge, experience, nationality, age, race, and gender. We have forwarded all 9 applications for consideration to the Standing Committee, as the regulations require that any vacancy occurring on the board, the accounting officer should compile a list of not less than 3 names of the most suitable candidates for appointment. Based on the quality of the applications received, it is unlikely that the committee would be unable to recommend 3 suitable candidates, but obviously that is for the committee to decide. This would enable the Provincial Treasury to circumvent further expenditure as well as time saving for the Standing Committee, Provincial Cabinet, and the Provincial Treasury if we are able to fill all 3 vacancies, or well, 1 vacancy and 2 upcoming vacancies. As indicated, there was 1 applicant, Mr. Tango, who indicated an address outside of the Western Cape, and we have provided this information to the Standing Committee to consider his status with regards to being ordinary resident. The next 2 slides provide a brief summary in terms of the applications we've received. I don't know if the Standing Committee needs me to go into great detail, but on what there's a couple of candidates who've indicated governance and finance experience. There's a number of the candidates who have previously served on the board. So they have experience and knowledge of the gambling industry. And I'm not going to take you through each single individual. I think one can read that. And obviously, when the application forms are made available to the committee, one can ascertain greater detail in terms of what's contained in their application forms. But that's a high-level summary of all the applications received. Tony, if you can please go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So in terms of the process ahead, in the event that the Standing Committee wishes to conduct interviews, and should the Standing Committee wish to do so, Provincial Treasury can provide a list of possible questions and an answering guide. Provincial Treasury to provide the Standing Committee Secretariat with the candidate details of all shortlisted candidates. The Standing Committee to evaluate candidates and make a recommendation to the responsible member for consideration by the Executive Council. And to the extent possible, that the Standing Committee provide a ranking in order of preference of possible members for the Gambling Board going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Horton. Before I open for questions and answers from the members, can you just please go back to the list of the names on the short list that you have sent us? Because I would like you to tell the committee in terms of the Act, whether all of those persons are natural persons, are 25 years old, are South African citizens. You've already mentioned the one person that is possibly not ordinarily resident, but they're all fit and proper, are they all good financial standing, and all of them are not disqualified in terms of the Act, because that will likely be questions that are going to come up anyway. So I would like you to indicate, is there people who, for example, this one possibly has a criminal record, or this one might have had financial fraud, or like, I don't want you to go into really specifics. I just want to understand, are all the Act requirements dealt with?
That is the purpose of the probity, is to verify the information that's provided by the applicants, but there were no exceptions in terms of this Act that were noted in the probity investigation.
Okay, so we can then go deeper into the results of the probity.
Yes,
then
but,
in
yes,
the end of the
nothing
meeting.
in terms of the Act that would prohibit the Standing Committee considering the applicants. And obviously the committee would consider in terms of the quality, but in terms of things that would disqualify an application, no. Nothing was found in the probities.
Okay, I'm going to open for questions from the members. Members, could you please indicate whether you would like to ask questions? And if it's on a particular person other than the residency, we're going to keep it for the probity section. Going once, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Okay, you may go ahead because I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to say thank you to the department for the presentation and for the work that has gone into this already. Can I just ask something which we previously commented on, is that obviously we appreciate the fact that you are already thinking of vacancies that will occur in the future. And it seems to me then from this process as if you are already setting yourself up not to repeat this whole and presume quite costly process, but for us to now submit names which can also be used when future vacancies arise. Now, these positions or the adverts were placed in November of last year. And my question is, first, would you like us to fill only the one position, the vacancy? Or is it your intention that we should also already consider and therefore put forward names for the vacancies that might arise or that will arise in May of next year? Because it does feel to me like an awful long time for us now already to nominate names for upcoming vacancies. So if I could just get that clarity, Chair, thank you.
We are
requesting.
requesting.
I just want to find out from other members if there are any other questions, because I would prefer them all to be asked at once. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, then I have a question then. I don't understand, when the suitability of candidates are assessed, what qualifications are looked at? Because I saw, for example, on the shortlist, one person who has matric. So I just want to find out specifically what are the qualification and experience requirements where the accounting officer says, okay, based on the application that we received, this is the shortlist that I'm going to advise to the committee in order to go forward. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of the first question, in terms of is it appropriate for the committee to be considering possible members for forthcoming vacancies? We did previously get a legal opinion on this, and the legal opinion said it would be quite acceptable and perhaps necessary to do so given the time it takes to fill a vacancy. So if one, for example, one would want to fill the December vacancy, we'd probably would run out of time given the length of time it actually takes this process to do this. So if we do not start prior to a vacancy coming available on the board, we would have a problem with the board being quorate. So the request is that this committee do consider filling the forthcoming applications or vacancies that would fall due in December and May. Because if we were to start the process now, we would not have sufficient time to fill a vacancy now already for December. And I think there's nothing that prohibits the board, the committee now considering those applications, I think, in terms of, and also it's just expedient in terms of financial implications. The process is quite expensive in terms of calling for nominations to serve on a board, in terms of the media that we have to advertise it in. And it is quite a time-consuming process, both in terms of for the committee's time, the Provincial Treasury's time, as well as the executive's time to consider applicants. And as I've indicated, we have received legal opinion that indicates that the process itself does necessitate quite a long lead time to fulfill this. And that has been the process that we have followed previously. In terms of the shortlisting of applicants, the Act is not clear in terms of disqualifying somebody in terms of their qualifications or their work experience. And we do try to present quite a diversified number of individuals in terms of what the committee can consider. So there'd be other instances where, and it hasn't been in this case that we've picked up, but in previous instances, we would like to attract people with perhaps disabilities to be reflective of society. We would like people that have experience in the NGO kind of environment, just to get a broader spread of suitable candidates that are representative of the Western Cape in terms of the various interests that people in the Western Cape may hold. So we do try and present a list of suitable candidates that we think could be considered by this committee. And that's the process that we do normally follow. In this case, though, for this round, we have presented all 9 names who had completed their application form, because they are considered to be possible candidates. There's nothing that would disqualify any of the 9 from being considered.
Thank you. Honourable van der Westhuizen, you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for a response regarding the timeframes. Chair, could I just ask, would it be possible for the department to just confirm with candidates after 9 months whether they are still interested in taking up this position before we, submit names, etc.? Obviously, I presume if we invite them to interviews, and that is a process that we will probably discuss just now, people will then also, be able to indicate that they are no longer available or interested in this position. But I think we must take into account that in 9 months, a lot can change. December would be 13 months. since the advert, and May next year would be 18 months since the advert appeared. And I do think that being timeous, being swift, is also a sign of efficiency, and I'm highly concerned about the image of the Western Cape Provincial Administration that is being created by these terribly long time frames. So just to first cover ourselves, my question is, have you got any indication at this point in time whether all the candidates are still interested in being considered for this position? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that once we also discuss whether or not we want to do interviews, that we can also make sure that persons want to actually be part of the process still. But I just want to find out, Mr. Phillips or Ms. Horton, if the candidates are still interested in being in the process. Do you know, or is it something that we need to consider before we go further? I see Dr. Leah's hand is also up after you. Yes.
Okay. No, but you can respond first. Doc, you can respond first.
Okay.
From our side, we believe that the candidates are still interested. We appointed the service provider to conduct probity checks in March 2020. So the service provider has been in contact with the candidates between end of March to mid-May. And at that time, all the candidates were still interested in participating in this process further. But we are not averse to conducting the candidates again this week for the comfort of the committee.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Leah. Members, I think we have a few things to discuss then, and I'll ask Treasury to stay online just in case we have any questions regarding this. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, would we like to invite the shortlisted members that we have received from Treasury for interviews? So that's the first part. Members, if I could have an indication. Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would agree that we should invite applicants for an interview.
Okay.
Albeit short one, but we invite them. I think it's important.
Okay. Other members, any indication? Because members, the reason I ask this obviously is that we do not need to interview them in terms of the Act. My personal view, however, is that I think interviews would assist us in determining their suitability. I see Honourable van der Westhuizen's hand.
I agree to the proposal.
Okay. Honourable Makamba Bocha, is still there? How do you feel? Okay, I see your hand.
Chair, I also agree. Is this now the interview that you're talking about? That we should invite them in an interview?
Yes. So, okay.
No problem.
Honourable Nkondlo, are you with us? I think perhaps earlier you may have had some technical difficulties. Okay, perhaps Honourable Nkondlo is still having technical difficulties. Honourable Mitchell, is your hand still up?
Apologies, Chair. I'll lower it now.
No problem. The second question I have then for members are then, do we want the interviews to be closed? Last year we had the interviews closed, and our reasoning last year was that if one person comes in and they hear the interview questions, and the last person watching or knows essentially what the questions are, because obviously everything is recorded. So if I could have an indication from members, how do they feel about interviews being open or closed? Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I believe that, normally when one conducts interviews, the one candidate doesn't sit in and listen to another candidate's responses, etc. Now, being online, obviously, it's far more difficult to have that kind of confidential setup. And therefore, I would propose that we go for a closed session, and therefore that the interview process will not be broadcast on YouTube and on other means.
Okay, I see Honorable Makamba Bocha's hand.
Sure, I think I'll go for a closed interview for consistency and also for to also secure save other members in terms of getting information before they get into the interview. I think it's best if we go for a closed interview.
Okay, members, just remember our scores and the reason for our scores are public, but this is just regarding whether or not we want the interview closed. So, okay. Honorable Mitchell, Honorable Mkondlo, how do you feel? I would like some of these things to be quite unanimous before we move ahead.
I agree, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Mkondlo, perhaps the procedural officer can maybe just contact Honorable Mkondlo, because I see her on our participants list, but I don't hear her, so she might just be having some technical problems. And I also just wanted to add quickly, I've received message that Mr. Savage did actually submit an apology. So I just wanted to let that know before I go on with the other questions. Honorable Makamba Bocha, you had your hand up. Oh, no.
Sorry, it was before, sorry.
No problem. Honorable Mkondlo, are you with us? I see your hand now.
Do you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you, Honorable Mkondlo.
Excuse me there, and my apologies. I may ask things that have been presented, but I just had questions from the presentation that was sent. I had questions that I had put together, Chair. Can I ask those questions?
Yes, you may. Go ahead and ask your questions, Honorable Mkondlo.
Okay. I wanted to check, Chair, to the delegation, and thank you for the presentation.
Apologies, Honorable Mkondlo, before you just go ahead, Mr. Foster, I'm just going to ask that you do not share the finding report probity assessments just yet, as we did indicate in the beginning of the meeting that we're going to have it at the end of the meeting after the legislation, and that we're going to have it closed because it relates to people's personal information. If you could just unshare the screen. Luckily, no person's name is attached. No, thank you. That's fine. I just want to be a bit vigilant. Make sure that
unshare. I'm just working on the settings here.
no problem. Thank you so much. Honorable Mkondlo, apologies for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure quickly that people's names are not connected to their personal information on the screen.
No, thank you, Chairperson. And it's always good to have you alert on these matters. Let me, I think my few questions. One, I wanted to know, I see that a consultant has been used for the probity assessment. I just wanted to know how much was the cost of the assessment? And also, is it a cost that we have been paying as part of your normal this particular process of assessment? Secondly, what are other costs, in the process of nomination is incurred towards, getting new board members? If such a breakdown can be provided. And then in terms of section 5F in the presentation, I want to check the actual slide number, Chair. Yeah, section 5 is in slide 4. I'm trying to check.
Mr. Phillips, is it quickly possible for you to put slide 4 up for us?
It's slide 3 actually On the
slide. Okay.
Yeah, section 5, the disqualification from appointment in the composition of the board, the requirements. I wanted to ask, Chairperson, how do we assess? Because if I read there, it says anyone, whether personally or through a spouse, family or partner or associate, has got direct or indirect financial interest in gambling business or establishment, has interest in business or enterprise that may conflict. So I'm trying to understand in the process of the assessment of the candidates, how do we assess this particular provision? If my question is clear. And then on slide 8, on the current process, I just wanted to check. I see that the media coverage, I think it's your national newspapers in terms of the ad, and I wanted to check, is it sufficient? If the department can give me that, and I see that Vukani was only included, during the period of the objections, but not on the actual edition. So I just want to understand why was that, and what can be drawn from a Vukani constituency or readership that actually didn't have the initial advert, unless it was just omitted, in the presentation. And the last one, I think on slide 7, I wanted to check when I look at the requirements, and I think on another slide, I think it speaks to this, the industry knowledge of board members as one criteria. I see a governance, I see, financial management, public admin, and all of that. Have we considered, I think, in terms of the new replacements or new board members we are recruiting, have we actually considered the issue of industry knowledge in terms of gambling, as a sector, to identify as part, of the requirements that would put up there? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Nkondlo. Questions 1, 3, and 4 of Honourable Nkondlo, the department can take. Question 2 regarding the disqualifications, I can quickly just indicate. So usually what happens is, in the probity, the department gives us all of the information on every single individual essentially on the shortlist. So for example, Deirdre would have an ID number, Deirdre would have, for example, the qualifications, Deirdre would have whether she has a criminal record, and Deirdre would also have information on their family members. So at the end of this meeting, we're going to go through the probity report, and as a committee, we have to assess those particular matters. But if the department has anything to add to that, please do. Honourable Makamba Bocha, I see you have a hand up. Is it from earlier or is it a new question?
It's from earlier, Chair, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay, Mr. Phillips and Ms. Horton, you guys can indicate who will be answering which questions then.
Look, Doc, I think Doc will be answering actually that part of it in terms of the cost, and then I think Claire will actually come with a selection of just the media that we've selected with regard to that. But there were some questions actually the member asked actually that will come out through the probity report actually with the session with Mr. Sean basically a bit later, and I think that probably would be we get a better sense in terms of whether there's industry links and family members, whatever that in that regard. But can I just maybe hand over to Doc? I think just on that, on the cost and stuff, whatever, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Phillips, and thank you, Chair. The cost of the probity check, the ones that we conducted, we put it out through an open tender. The service provider was selected. It cost us 62,550 to do the property checks. The total cost of the whole entire process of running these advertisements and the like, I can give you the exact breakdown later, but it's in the order of 350,000. Those are the adverts that we run with all the I can hand over to Ms. Horton.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes, with regards to the question in terms of the selection of candidates, we try to, as you will notice from what we have provided in terms of the slides, the shortlist, there's a number of applicants who've either previously served on this board or have previously worked in the industry. There's one, the current chairperson has previously worked in the industry. There's also a number of applicants who've either served on the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board or have served on the Eastern Cape Gambling and Racing Board. So there is experience in terms of the industry, but I think it's important also that you need to also have broader experience in terms of society, in terms of exercising the mandate of regulating the gambling industry, because there's vested interest directly in terms of industry role players, but there's also the interests that need to be served in terms of the broader public. So you need a spectrum of people in terms of representing broader society, and hence also the King report in terms of diversity in terms of boards. In terms of the question with regards to Vukani, on slide 8, Vukani is indeed one of the newspapers that we used in terms of calling for nominations. So the same media that we used to call for nominations would have been the same media that we would have used to ask for comment on the applications received. So Vukani was covered in terms of the call for nominations.
Thank you. Honorable Nkondlo, I see your hand.
Chair, I think if that is the case with the last comment, it means I think the colleagues from the department must just indicate, because that's not what it says in the presentation, because the presentation has got Vukani only in the second in this the next point, you know, of confirming or objections. That's a small issue for me. The explanation is accepted, because as you see in the first bullet, Vukani is not there. And then I hear the point on, you know, a broad range of experience. But I think, and I'm not in any way contesting the current candidates. I'm saying I think there is a point in the slide where one of the things is industry experience. Part of it, because I think as we are also dealing with some of the amendments to the bill, the understanding of, you know, gambling sector itself over and above your general, you know, legal knowledge and all of that. I would think that is what is being referred to as industry experience, industry in this sense being, you know, the gambling sector, you know. And I think if we go back to the previous engagement we had, you know, with the department around the issues of sustainability of the gambling board, you know, which are the things that we're dealing with currently. I think those are some of the things we need, because we need people with insight on how to assist. So I just wanted to raise that point, that I don't think it takes away, you know, the cross range of experience, but specifically, I think the issue of understanding the gambling sector for me is something, and maybe in these candidates we'll be looking at, we shall be able to see that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Regarding the experience, it will ultimately be up to the committee to determine whether someone is suitable. And that will be a debate amongst the members regarding the candidates. I just want to understand, because I do see Vukani at the first bullet on the slide for the call for nomination. So I just want to understand, can you just put the slide up quickly again for us? Because I see it there in the slide as well as at the objections. The call for nominations was placed in accordance with Regulation 3.1 in Vukani, Provincial Gazette, Mail and Guardian, Die Burger and Week in Argus. And then it's bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that specifies the commenting period and call for public comment, and Vukani is there as well.
Yeah,
Honourable
my apologies, Chair. I see it now. I missed it. My apologies.
No problem, no problem. Thank you. Okay, members, can we go on quickly then with just the process forward? So we've already indicated agreement that we want an interviews. We've already agreed then that it will be closed. The next question for the committee to consider then is we have put aside Friday the 21st of August, which is next week, not next week Friday, for the possible interviews. Is everyone okay with that? Next week Friday, 21st of August, from 8 o'clock till 6 then. Going once, going twice.
It's okay, it's okay. I support, Chair.
Okay. And then members, I wanted to find out, the next question is, the first hour before we do the interviews, is it okay then that we use that first hour just to complete which questions we would like to ask the candidates? That will then give us time to get the guidelines from the department. We can also then send the previous stuff from last year that we used as questions to members, and then members, we can then use that hour to decide, okay, do we want to use previous questions? Do we want to use new questions? Do we want to use anything from the guideline, or do we want to create our own questions? Would that be okay, members? No, yes.
Noted, Chair.
Okay.
Supported.
And okay. The next question I then have for the committee is, last year we had 30 minutes for every interview, but because we're going to be doing it virtually, I would like to suggest that we bring it down to 20 minutes because we also realized last year that 30 minutes was quite a bit of time we actually had. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would also agree with the 20 minutes, but can I ask that, say, for example, after every 3 candidates, we leave a 10 minutes or a 15 minutes open slot for us just to stretch our legs, or alternatively, if we should run over time, to be able to, make up time so that, candidates are not kept waiting for too long, depending on how you time their answers and whether we have a timekeeper, etc.
Okay, members, is it okay then if we take 10 minutes between each interview to stretch our legs, if someone needs a bathroom break, as well as if we need to deliberate after each interview?
Sorry, Chair, I think you misunderstood me. After every 3, so if it's a 20 minutes, so it's for an hour, and then we take my proposal would be a 15-minute break, and then again 20 minute running one straight after the other, and then again a little break for us to deliberate.
Okay, members, are you happy with that then? We take 15-minute breaks after every 3 candidates, and we'll use that for deliberation, stretching our legs, and bathroom breaks. Everyone happy? Okay, no one is indicating, so I'm going to assume that's okay. Okay, members, is it okay also further that from, let's say, 12 o'clock and until 1 o'clock, because we're going to be busy from 8 o'clock. So from 12 to 1, can we take a lunch break so that everyone can go into their kitchens and make themselves a sandwich?
You are so kind.
Yes, no, I must put this, I want us to agree on these things because we're going to be busy a whole day with interviews. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Chair, again, could I ask that we be a little bit faster with our sandwiches and bring the lunch break down to half an hour? I don't know how big your residence is, but my kitchen is not that far from me. Thank you.
Okay, members, are you okay then from 12 o'clock until 12:30? We take a lunch break. Is 30 minutes enough to make a sandwich, members? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
okay.
indeed.
Yes, it
30
is.
minutes. Perfect. That's enough to make a sandwich. Okay. Then I would like to ask after our interviews, if we could then stay behind, deliberate on all of the interviews, and then after the deliberation, take a half-an-hour break for our procedural officer to write up the report on what we've deliberated, and then after that to take another half an hour then to consider and adopt our report, so that everything will be completed on Friday then. Would that be okay with members? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, I'm going to assume that's a yes then. Then the probity stuff we're doing at the end. Score sheets, we're doing that on the first hour. And then members, I wanted to find out if it's okay if we then request that the documents, the physical documents that we need for the interview, that we receive those by Friday, 14 August, and that we also then invite the candidates 1 week before the interviews, which will also then be the 14th of August. Are members happy with that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, I'm going to assume it's a yes.
Agree,
okay.
Chair.
And then I wanted to find out, because the documents are confidential information, because it's personal info about persons, and it's quite a big file, I wanted to find out how would members like to receive the documents, because not everyone's secretary is at the office to open up the door, for example, and not everyone is necessarily able to come into the office to get the documents. So I would like to find out from members what is most convenient for them. Going once, going twice. Okay, I have a suggestion. My suggestion, okay, Honorable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. I've always found the hard copies to be the easiest to work with, and I would appreciate it if those could be couriered to us. And I don't know if you've been able to discuss it or if the procedural officer could come in now, but even if I have to fetch it from somewhere in Cape Town, I would prefer to have the hard copies.
Okay. Ms. Adams, are you online? Would it be possible for us to courier the documents to members and perhaps for them to then sign for the documents?
Hi, Chair, yes, we can try that method, but we're also looking at another method where we have our WCPP officials drop it at the members' residence. So we'll give members calls for that to see where they are on that day, and then we'll make a plan.
Okay. Members, would it then be okay that between the procedural officer and the WCPP official who drives, that they call you to find out where you will be, so that we can then decide to either courier to you or for it to be dropped off, dependent on the practicalities and the convenience, and that if we have to courier in the end, that then gets paid out of the committee budget.
That's
fantastic.
That's okay. I support.
Okay, that's fine then. And members, just a reminder, given the confidential and personal information, I'm going to ask that the procedural officer or the courier or the driver, whoever ends up being the most convenient and practical, that you just please sign for the documents. It is personal information of the people that we're going to be interviewing. The next, let me just see what's the next question. Okay, I think those were all the questions I was supposed to ask you leading up to the process. And the probity we're going to obviously be discussing at the end of the meeting. Treasury, I'm going to now ask you obviously to stay online because I would like to discuss the process regarding the submissions we've received in terms of the gambling amendment, the 19th bill. Is that okay with you?
Yes, yes, Chairperson.
Okay. Members, okay, let me just quickly open this. So we have received submissions regarding the Western Cape 19th Gambling and Racing Amendment Bill, B1 2020. The committee had advertised the bill in the Burger, in the Vukani, in the Cape Times, the August, and the Mail and Guardian. The deadline for the submissions on the comments on the bill was the 31st of July 2020. The committee received 8 submissions. 2 submissions were received during the gazetting period, 4 submissions were received before the deadline, and 2 submissions received on 1 August 2020. That's after the deadline, but it was from the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the National Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. The matrix of the submissions have been forwarded to members as well as Provincial Treasury and the legal advisors. 6 of the stakeholders that have submitted comments on the bill have requested to make oral submissions to the committee. And now the committee must decide on whether we want to have public hearings, how many, but we have put aside a tentative date in case the committee wants to have a public hearing, and that date is the 9th of September. And we also have to decide whether we want to advertise that the public hearing is going to take place, as well as whether we want it on social media and so on. So we have a number of questions that we need to also deal with quickly. My first question is, despite receiving 2 submissions late, I would like us to please include those submissions in our total submissions to consider. Would that be possible, members? Yes, no, maybe.
Supported, Chair. Supported.
Okay. The next question that we have to ask is, do we want a public hearing? My advice to the committee would be that we should go ahead and have the public hearing now that we know that we have received submissions on the bill. Members,
Chair.
yes, no, maybe. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Can I just ask, did any of the people indicate that they would like, oh, you're talking about public engagement, not oral submissions?
So out of, let me just quickly read it again. Out of the submissions we've received, 6 have indicated that they would like to make oral submissions. So my suggestion is that we then say to the 6 who've said we want to make oral submissions, yes, you can make oral submissions, and that essentially would be called a public hearing in terms of the legislative process.
Absolutely, agree.
Okay.
Supported.
Perfect, thank you so much. Members, the next question I have to ask is, do we want to advertise the public hearing again? My suggestion is that we have already advertised asking for comment and asking that people must indicate if they want to make oral submissions. I would like to suggest that the committee then say, okay, we're going to have a public hearing. If you would like to make an oral submission, please be in the meeting of the public hearing that we're going to then have online, but that we don't need to put that again in the newspapers as adverts because we have done that previously. Members, any indications on that?
Can you just explain to me, Chair, if that is I support the notion of that public hearing. Now, all I'm saying from the advertisement point of view, if somebody outside of the ones that have given an indication would like to be part of that public hearing, would those individuals be allowed? Is that what it means, yes, even outside of the advert? Okay.
Yes. So
right.
because we've already put out an advert saying, please send comments. The
Yeah.
deadline was the 31st of July. These are the comments we've received, and out of those comments, certain people have said we want to make oral submissions. Now, obviously, because it's a whole nother process to put something in the newspaper again, my suggestion is then that at the public hearing, we do it on the 9th of September, the date we've set aside tentatively. We invite those who said we want to make oral submissions, but that we leave a little bit of time at the end also for anyone who ends up in the meeting saying, I'm putting up my hand, I would like to speak to the committee about this bill.
Okay.
Everyone
Supported.
happy with that? Okay. The next question then is it okay if we then ask the public education or media office then to just also put it on the social media for us?
Yeah, boo.
Okay, let me just see quickly if I've asked everything. And members are okay with the 9th of September. It is in one of our slots. That will then essentially be our public hearing date. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, members, I would also then like to request that there is an extra slot on Friday the 11th, which is 2 days after the public hearing. I would like to suggest that on the 11th of September, what we do is we ask Provincial Treasury to then do a presentation where they respond to the written and the oral submissions, and then we go through all of that. Would that be okay?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, let me just see if we've dealt with everything. Yes, I think we've dealt with everything regarding the legislation then. Perfect. Members, unless there's anything else regarding the legislation procedure, we can now then go to the probity report. And I'm going to now ask that as per our decision in the beginning of the meeting, that we please close this section. And we've already made that decision. So Mr. Abbas, are you still online? Tafsir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. If you could please now suspend the YouTube so that we can close, so that we can go through the probity report.
Sure.
Thank you. And then if you can just confirm with us once it is